Dad, I'm tired of it here. I'm tired of you. I'm tired of this house, this family, and I'm tired of my self-righteous brother. I imagine that would be like really difficult to hear for a dad. Thankfully, I've only had one move out so far, and that's not how she left. Okay, but there's something about there's this child who leaves the house and feels like he deserves everything, right? He feels like I want to take all my stuff, and like Dad's like, you don't really have stuff, right? Like I have stuff. You live here, but there's this this idea, it's like in Luke 15 it says this, verse 13. It says, "A few days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and traveled to a distant region, and there he squandered his wealth in dissolute living." Do you know this story? The prodigal son, right? I feel like it's a story that I've lived over and over and over again throughout my life. And so if you don't know the story, essentially a young man, right, that goes to his dad and demands his share of the estate, and then says, he leaves, he goes off, squanders it all, right, and then decides, well, I'm gonna come home, and when he comes home, Dad welcomes him, but his brother does not. His brother's really upset that they would even talk to him or allow him in the house and in the property, and And what I mean by this story that we rehearse, I feel like I rehearse over and over, it's that there's always seems to be a part of us that's pulling away from Jesus. There's always this kind of something, the world's always pulling us in a direction. And so, for the one, this story, many of us are battling daily between the rebellion of the one son and the self-righteousness of the other, right? Sometimes we have that self-righteousness inside of us that tends to look down on people. And hopefully we catch that when it happens. But if you're human, any humans? Okay, we got a few humans, good. So, but when we look at the story, like if we had to pick which son we might be, like we generally want to pick the younger one, right? It's like, because we're like, oh, we did our thing, right? Teenager, and so we kind of begin to say, well, I've kind of got it back together, and so I'm more kind of like the prodigal son than the older brother. I did the party thing, and now I don't do those things. I don't do these things, right? It's this kind of, that's kind of what happens in the story a bit. But what shocked me was when I realized that I was a lot more like the older brother than the younger brother. It's like, I could tell you the tough stories, but I would tell the tough stories that I'd been through, and this is at my last church, I would tell these stories, but it was really so you could kind of go, oh, but now look how good I'm doing, right? It was like, I'm going to tell you this story, but because I want to show you how righteous I've become. I was confident. I was very confident in my call. I felt like Jeremiah was my guy. It was like I've been anointed I was 19 when I started preaching. Right, I was very prideful. I was kind of like Paul when he's in Philippians 3. He says, it's kind of my version. It was like I was in Sunday school like when I was like 8 days old. Right, like I've been in church. I was Church of God. We were solo scriptura. It's like I was a preacher. As for zeal, like I was planting churches. And I was confident that there were penguins on Noah's Ark. I was confident. But worst of all, I was confident about who was in and who was out of God's kingdom. Like that's the energy of the big brother. Prideful, deciding he's not a door holder, he's a gatekeeper, right? We know the difference? Keeping people in from getting in and deciding who's in and out. And so Jesus doesn't give us a lot of info on the younger brother. No background. We don't know how he was treated in the house. We don't know if he left because, was there a big blow up, or did he leave? Was it just kind of a slow trickle of negativity that he just finally gave up? We don't get all of that information. But what we do know is that this story is one of three stories in the chapter. And they all revolve around the idea of something being lost, right? So you have the lost sheep that it begins with. And so we don't know why the sheep got lost, right? But it had its head down like sheep do and wanders off, and the shepherd wasn't paying attention, right? Was watching after the others, and the one wandered off. And then the second story is about a coin. If you know the story, right? So the lady loses her coin, and they look all over for it. But it's how did you lose the coin? Did you misplace it? Was it, did you get busy doing other things? Were you counting other coins? And you had so many coins at the time, maybe? We don't know, all those things, but we know that it wasn't the sheep's fault, and we know it's not the coin's fault. So why, when we read the story of the prodigal son, do we immediately go to, what's wrong with that boy? Right? Because we didn't say it about the sheep or the coin. What's wrong with that boy? It's because we tend to read things. We tend to read this story from the seat of the older brother, going, this guy, how could he do that to dad? Right? How could he do that to somebody that provided everything for him? Right? This is kind of the energy that we read this with. How could he do something like that to dad? How could he act like that? And it's really the oldest story in Scripture. You can go back. It's kind of it's like a retelling of the Cain and Abel story, right? It's to some degree, it's two brothers, one who felt he could live up to the expectation, one who felt he couldn't live up to the expectations of the father, right? That's Cain and Abel. And so Cain does, so the younger brother does the exact same thing essentially that Cain does, right? He goes, "You're dead to me. I don't want anything to do with this house," right? Verse 12, it said, the young said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the wealth that will belong to me." And so he divided his assets between them. So that's what it meant, though, to ask for your inheritance before your father had passed, right? Is literally saying, I wish you were dead. I wish I was not here. I don't want anything to do with you. But we do know something about the younger brother, though. And it gets slowly revealed as we read the rest of the story. So let's pick up in verse 14. It says, when he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the region, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of the region, who sent him to the fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. Now, Jesus is telling this story to a group of Pharisees, Sadducees, and all different kind of religious elite people. And so when he mentions pigs, there would be a gasp, all right, in the crowd, because you were not allowed. It was illegal. It was against the law for Jews to touch pigs, right? Let alone eat with them, and you just didn't do it. For Jews, pigs, they weren't just dirty, they were forbidden, defiling, and off limits. So when Jesus said he was feeding pigs, right, he's not just saying that he's blown all his money, right, which he has done. He said that. He's also saying he is utterly lost. He has lost identity. He has lost everything about him. He is at the bottom of life. And verse 17 says this, but when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired hands have had bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands. And so he set off and went to his father. So what do we learn about the younger son there? The younger brother doesn't really know the father, right? Because what is he doing? He's like, I'm going to prepare my speech. right? I'm going to get this speech ready, and I'm going to go home, and I'm going to try to work it off, right? I'm going to try to work really hard to get back in the good graces of Dad. And maybe I'm going to be more like my older brother, right? I'm going to do all these things that I thought was expected of me. I'm going to work hard, Dad. See, he's preparing a speech for a father who isn't interested in hearing one, but he sees his dad as a tyrant, right? And a self-righteous brother as the ideal. That's how he views the house, views the home. And so listen, that's not who God is, right? That's not who we're called to be. But if that's who you believe God is, and if that's who you believe the people of God are, why would you stay? Right? I mean, why? Of course he leaves, right? Of course he's not welcome. He's not accepted for who he is. And so that's what the church has done to a generations, right, of people, of young people who we've expressed this kind of version of a tyrannical God. I'm not saying we're doing it here, but the church in general, there's this idea of this tyrannical God that wants to smite you at exactly where you are just for being who you are because you're not good enough. Like that's what I grew up with. Anybody? I got a couple. And so I just imagine being a queer kid that grew up in church, knowing inside that you're not like everyone else, but all you hear over and over is that God doesn't like you for who you are. Like that's the message that the church has been sending for years. And so how many times can you sit through being called vile and steeped in sin? How long could you actually sit in church and let someone tell you that over and over and over again before you say, to hell with it? Not long. So we have traumatized generations of humans loved by God because we don't fully grasp God's love for each of us. We can't grasp it. It's so wide and so open and so expansive. But now watch this next part. It says, but while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. And so I don't know if you've probably heard this sermon preached 100 times, and so there's always kind of this discussion around the running of the father, right? Because the fathers, patriarchs didn't run. Patriarchs they had people that ran for them, right? He didn't run because it was you had to, because for him to run, he would have to kind of hike up his robe, and it would expose like his shins. And it's like you don't get to see the patriarch's shins either, right? This is not a thing that you're allowed to do. You don't do it. And so it's often like this beautiful scene, that he's running towards his son, and right the music plays and the slow motion starts, right? It's this beautiful thing, but he's not. It misses something huge that I learned this week, and it's just so cool. Like the people in the crowd, right? So Pharisees and people who understood patriarchal culture, they knew what would happen if the father didn't run. And here's what I mean. So he wasn't just running to his son. He's running actually for his son. So as the son, you can imagine the son is approaching town, right? And so there's going to be all kinds of people still around, people that work for the father or are related or just from the town around. They would have kind of seen him coming, and they would have started whispering. There he is. I can't believe he came back. What is he thinking? And so what would start to happen is there's a ceremony called, I'm going to say this wrong, kazaza, okay? Kazaza. And so what would happen is this was a ceremony that they would come around, and it was a public cutting off. It was a permanent rejection, right? So they would come to him as a mob, and they would break a jar in front of him. They would take a jar and smash it in front of him, and they would say, "You are no longer part of us." Right? That's actually, so that was what they would expect. That's what the son would expect. That's what the father would expect to happen. And so the father, so now you understand why he doesn't want, why he was preparing the speech, right? He's preparing the speech because he knows there's a mob waiting for him, right? He knows that there's rejection waiting. He knows what he did. He might have been a part of one of these ceremonies before, right? Like, so he understands. So he's got this speech ready. And so this kid he's not coming home to be embraced. He's not coming home to rekindle relationship. He's actually just coming home to survive as a servant. And so he begins his speech. Then the son said to him, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." And then verse 22, the father just cuts him off. Right? And he just goes, shush, shush. And he calls out to his servants, right? Hey, quickly bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fattest calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found, and we begin to celebrate. And so the father saves, he was running to save him, right? Not just to embrace him, but to save him from those that would say, you've done too much, you've gone too far. You're not welcome back. And the father says, you have no idea how much I love this son. So let me be clear here. The father in this story is Jesus, and he is explaining to the crowd why he hangs out with sinners and tax collectors. Right? If you go back to the very first two verses of Luke 15, verse 1, it says, "Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, 'This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" And so Jesus is like, hey, I'm spending time with this people because you refuse to. These people are out here because you failed in your mission, right? Like these people, you were called to tend to the sheep and you let them wander off, right? You were called to keep after the coin and you lost it, and your pride and your self-righteousness have chased them off. And so Jesus is showing us what the church ought to look like. That's what this passage is. What should the church look like? Because remember, the church is the body of Christ. And so number one, our churches should be full of joy. Our churches should be, verse 24, right? "For the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found," and they began to celebrate. And so by joy, I don't mean happy all the time. Joy and happy are two very, happiness is fleeting. Joy is a deep inside of us. And so we understand that there's something going on in our worlds, that we could be in tragedy, we have sick people here, we have all kinds of things going on, but there's still this moment where we're always able to come in here, and no matter what's happening in our lives, for just maybe 20 minutes when Brendan's leading us in worship, we can just go, I am loved by the creator of the world. No matter what's happening in my life, I know just for those moments I can kind of check out and go, God, you're amazing. I'm so happy that I'm loved by you. And so it's a moment of peace, but it's a joy in God. And so, yeah, we should be a church that celebrates and we sing. There should be music. There should be laughter, right? All these things. We should be celebrating church. Number two, the church should be a place that is full of compassion. Full of compassion. Luke 15:20, right? "So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion." And again, what we find out? That it's not just any compassion, right? It was a protective compassion. The father was running, joyous to see his son, but in protection of the son, right? And so we should be filled with compassion, a protective compassion. And I think most churches, most churches are doing what they think is right. But I'm telling you, I am interested in the people that churches reject. Because Jesus was interested in the people that religion rejected. Right? That's what the church is called to be. Full of compassion. And listen, I know what it's like to be rejected because of my own sin. My own sin. To be kind of said, you know what, we're good, Carson. And I tell you, when I walked into this church in 2019, my head was up high, but my soul was not. And I tell you what, I walked into this building, and I felt compassion. No one knew my story, but I felt welcome. No one knew me, knew my family. I felt that they felt welcome. And so, listen, you guys, I feel like you took me in. You put a ring on my finger and a robe on me. You said you're one of us. And that's literally what the church is supposed to do. And that's why there's so much hope here. There's so much hope in what God is doing in this church, because the ethos, like the culture is correct, right? Like we're gonna get out and do more, but the culture inside is correct. It is full of compassion. Number 3, the church is called to run into the field. The church goes towards people. Right? This is the verse. But while he was still far off, his father saw him, was filled with compassion. He ran, put his arms around him, and kissed him. See, the father was willing to leave the castle. Right? The father was willing to get out of the safety of the building, because it's safe here. This is a safe. I tell people in school all the time, I go, listen, seminary should not be a safe place. Like, that's where ideas come to live and die. But at church, like, this is a place. When you're here, like, it's a safe place, but it's not what we're meant for. It's not the gathering, it's the spreading. And so we're called to go, to run into the field, to run towards people that are hurt and broken. Run towards people the church has rejected. Run towards people that think they don't have a shot, right? That they've got a speech. How easy it is to end up with a temple model for a church where it's all about getting people inside. But I'm telling you, if we become an outside running towards people church, you won't have to worry about getting people inside, right? My mom used to say, it's a rabbit, not a yabbit. Anybody familiar with that? Because I'd try to talk my way out of everything. I'd say, yeah, but he started it. Yeah, but I didn't know. Yeah, but I'm different, right? It's like, and so she just go, I've never heard of a yabbit, Carson. And I'm like, come on, Mom, you know what I mean? But we have our own yabbits in the church. Yeah, but they parked in my spot. Yeah, but they sat in my seat. Yeah, they ate my favorite Karen's donuts. Yeah, but their tattoos make me nervous. They don't know how to act. Yeah, but they've got a past. Yeah, but they're not our kind of people. Yeah, but they're divorced. Yeah, but they're LGBTQ. Or this one. Yeah, but they voted differently. Hear me, church. No yabbits allowed. We are door holders, not gatekeepers. Yeah, but what about those people? Those people are exactly the ones that Jesus ran toward. They're exactly who we're called to be. And so how could we ever say, yeah, but, to someone that God has already said yes to? And so this is the last thing. The church is a place where we don't need your apology letter. You don't have to come with an excuse or a reason, or in fact, we might owe the apology letter. And so we might have been the big brother for too long, and it's time to be the church. God bless you.